Welcome to the MIT at Innovation Program podcast. This is a repository of insights by thought leaders and practitioners of innovation where they speak about their views, insights, and experiences. Come join us.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another exciting initiative by MIT ID Innovation Program. On behalf of the core team, the alumni, and the cohort of 2020-21, we are grateful to be safe and amongst you all hosting the session today. For those who are joining us for the first time, we'd like to share that MIT stands for the ever progressive, 4-decade young Maharashtra Institute of Technology. ID stands for MIT's 15-year young Pioneering Institute of Design. MIT ID's latest contribution to strengthening the global innovation ecosystem is the one-year innovation program, which focuses on the 4 pillars of design, business, technology, and humanities. The key features and differentiators of this one-year course are a hands-on, highly customized, pro-practical, project-heavy based learning, deep immersions, and humanities. We tested our agility, adaptability, resilience as a team when we seamlessly delivered value-add experiences to our student innovators and the innovation ecosystem at large via close to 50 industry interactions across this disruptive year. More value-add series lined up as I speak. As promised, our open online courses focusing on innovation essentials have been launched this quarter. The duration of these certificate courses will range from 1 month to 9 months, in addition to a full-time 1-year campus-based course. Our masterclasses begin later this month. Moving on to today's session, we now welcome our guest faculty, innovator, Mr. Unmesh Kulkarni. He's a founder member of Oceanic Circles, a multi-dimensional insights-driven platform for collaborative design for social innovation and entrepreneurship. Former director of Honeywell User Experience, Philips Design, with global and regional design leadership roles working across continents, living in India and China. He co-founded a multi-disciplinary design consultancy and appropriate technology lab called Design Matters. He designed physical digital solutions globally across sectors, technologies, and regions, bringing branded product and service solutions to markets at scale across healthcare, industrial IoT, life safety, consumer appliances, and electronics, lighting, FMCG, crafts, appropriate technologies, etc. A firm believer in the power of simplicity and creative empowerment in solving complex real-world problems, he has a number of design awards to his credit, including the 2009 Index Award, Red Dot Design for Asia, Idea Eco Habitat Award, IF Award, etc. This is our 47th industry interaction this season, and I, Priya Dhawan, Head of Collaborations, Branding and Outreach at the MIT ID Innovation Program, welcome you all once again to this thoughtfully curated innovation journey. Please do read the chat for other important pointers that have been shared. I'd also like to invite the head of the innovation program, Associate Professor Mr. Harshad Desai, to say a few words.
Thanks, Priya. Thanks, Unmesh sir, for joining us on this wonderful day today. And I'm so glad that finally these things are coming to a fruition after a long time where we were hoping to expand the set of offerings. And apart from the one-year program, now we see this launch of the short, industry-focused and professionally curated programs for the larger stakeholders and the ecosystem here. So thank you, sir, for joining in, and we look forward to this particular session where we will try and explain what the entire scheme of things about social innovation is all about, and maybe try to understand what the actual masterclass that we have lined up later in the month holds for all the participants. So thank you once again, sir. Thanks, Priya, for setting this up, and without further ado, I invite Unmesh sir to get his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi everyone. Good afternoon, good morning. I don't know. I guess everybody's from India. So thanks MIT ID and the team for inviting me for this. This is really exciting. This is a topic that's really close to my heart, and this is something that I'm trying to build. So I'm learning as you're learning in the process, and so we're going to, sort of go through what we are planning. I mean, that's the whole intention for this chat. And essentially, when we look at what we are planning, I would also like to, sort of expose you to some of the thoughts in terms of what's happening outside the design world in social sector. And the whole idea is, I'm assuming that you know a bit of design and you know a bit of innovation, but I think it's about talking about what is innovation for social sector. Yeah. So thanks for whatever introduction and platform, everything. Yeah. So the question is, why are we here and why are you all here? Why is this so important? So I guess all of us are going through tough times. The world is still, sort of getting out of pandemic. It has impacted a lot of people in a lot of ways. I mean, a lot of people have got pushed into poverty. A lot of people have got pushed into health issues and psychological issues. Companies had to transform their strategies because they're moving from, say, being more physical to more virtual, etc., etc. And we also saw during this period that the rich got richer and the poor got poorer, despite of whatever middle class explosion. So the market practices, what we think are for growth and progress, are really not working for the overall development on Earth. And of course, it's very evident from what's happening to the climate and our inability to stop many things that are destroying the climate issue and pushing us into a bad phase. Yeah. So I think we have a chance to rewrite and recreate what is new normal. And so I think we're just going to look at those opportunities, and I hope I inspire some of you to look at this as a career challenge. So India has been, in a way, young country as we stand today. I mean, of course, we have ancient history, etc. But we are also very complex. It's like many countries together. This is a population map of India. If you had to, bring countries parallels here, so I think we have a lot of challenge in terms of how we sort of are set up. But we made progress in last, decades. When after the independence, we made progress in health, uh, poverty, literacy, sort of infrastructure in every possible way. Yeah, and I think from a receiving country to sort of country that contributes to world's development in terms of technology, knowledge, and sort of expertise, I think it's phenomenal. But there are still problems. We lack very low on some of the human development parameters. We have some of the most polluting cities in the world. We have a lot of deaths due to pollution. We have health issues. We have education issue challenges. I mean, a lot of our graduates are not employable. A lot of kids coming out of school and cannot read and simple things or do simple divisions. So I think there are challenges, and of course there are serious challenges that are coming in. So unfortunately, climate crisis is global, and India is going to face a lot of that in terms of weather and changing patterns on the ecosystems. So this is a map of Bombay. In optimistic scenario, we lose part of Bombay by 2050. In the pessimistic scenario, we lose a lot of Bombay in 2050. And this is just the Bombay scenario. We're not talking about the rest of the coastlines and other parts which are where there could be challenges in terms of riversides, etc. So we have a challenge, and it's not far away when you talk about 2050. We probably, some of us are going to see it in our lifetime. So we need to be very cognizant of that and what's happening to our material world. I mean, this is a visual anthropology project by Peter Menzel. I mean, it's a very interesting work by on global family portraits, where he is looking at socio-economic and lifestyle of people from the planet. But what it shows us is, our material positions and material growth has kind of changed how the earth is being loaded. So you have one family from a middle class, maybe developed part of the world, to a family from Rajasthan who's showing their positions, and I think the picture tells a lot. And I think designers have a lot of role to play in terms of how we define our life is. So in today's talk, I'm going to cover what is social innovation, how is it different from mainstream innovation, I mean, very briefly, and why design and innovation professionals should care about social innovation, and what you learn in the upcoming masterclass. So without spending time, so earliest definition of social innovation goes to Benjamin Franklin in 1766, founding father of America. He says, I'm for doing good for people, but I'm different in opinion about the means. I mean, he's referring to the charities. I think the best way to doing good is to the poor is to making them easy, not making them easy in poverty, but leading or driving them out of it. So giving food to hungry is one thing, but teaching hungry person to sow their food and grow their food is different. Yeah, that's more sustainable. So more contemporary definition, which is very similar from Stanford, is it's a process of developing and deploying effective solutions to challenging and often systemic social and environmental issues in support of social progress. So I think there's a systemic challenges, and there's also social progress. Those are essential part of this discussion. And it also talks about solutions offer required active collaboration of constituents across government, business, and non-profit work. And I think that's one big difference from the mainstream innovation, where a lot of times we don't talk about so many stakeholders. We talk about our customer and ourselves. So whereas here you may have the government and other businesses, other players coming in the picture. I also want to touch upon, a lot of people ask me this question: what is the difference in, say, social work and social innovation? I think they're completely different in many ways, though the spirit is same. So social enterprise, for example, that's a new term, new thing that's floating in last 5 years, wherein it's about building a business model for profit or not for profit, where your economic, social, and environmental returns on investments are important. Social innovation is all about creating ideas for change. Now, therefore, whom and who will take it up, that's a different discussion. But it's broadly, it's a role of a social innovator. And social work is about, it's a disciplined approach, taken up by professionals, and their commitment to change, cause change and development. So, and whereas social activity is doing good, on a specific occasion or a day, like clean your beach or plant a tree on a hill, etc. So I think we are talking about something which is very substantial, impactful, which is about innovation and which is about entrepreneurship. Yeah? So one of the things that we'll do is understand the social constructs. There are so many things in social discussion that happen that we need to be very aware and sensitive about. So right from, say, something like what is empowerment, equity, equality, environment, gender, sustainability, culture, economics, well-being, or diversity, power, violence, all these issues become very important, and we need to understand them from a very different lens that we are wearing. So we have to be also cognizant of the fact that we come from a very privileged background by the sort of nature of our birth. I mean, we are not from a remote village in Himalayas where there's abject poverty and there's no education. I mean, we are luckily not born there, and that's why we are here. So I think it becomes very important to develop that lens and sensitivity about others, and that's like true compassion or empathy that we sort of aim for. Now, we discussed that there are 3 pillars of this social sector, which is civil society, government, and market, or nowadays the popular jargon is Samaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar. So it's very important to understand what it means. So again, as I mentioned, the sector is changing, from a service or social work to more entrepreneurship. Yeah, and it's reflected by a lot of funding houses, social impact funding, or the government funding for innovation that's coming in. So I'm not saying funding is easy, but I think there's a lot of focus on this, and there's a fairly large amount of money, that's growing money, that's coming in this sector. Now, from top down, it is changing to more bottom up, more democratized development. and it's about empowering community. Earlier, it was about doing good for them kind of attitude, whereas now it's about how do you empower the community. So there's a lot of technocratic thinking in solutions. Like if somebody, say there's a water scarcity issue, then you'll say, okay, let's build a big dam, without thinking what it will destroy around you. Whereas now there's a whole new approach where people stand up and say, let's take a holistic approach, maybe do a bit of systems understanding and create solutions which are win-win for all. Then again, we just talked about poverty, human rights, equality, social justice, etc., all along, because those are extremely important to get right. But now there's also sense that the freedom and justice also needs economic development. So I think there's a lot of discussion on doing things in a more dignified way, giving people right of choice on quality of life, etc. that comes in. So I think it's a very different way people are looking at how social innovation should be done. And we to remember one thing: social innovation is not just about poverty. It's not just about villages. It could be any issue which has a larger, broader social impact. In any of those three things we talked about: environment, economics, and people. Yeah. So again, we'll probably get into this, but there's a phenomenal framework from United Nations. These are strategic development goals. There's 17 goals which have a lot of interdependency, connectivity, and all the countries are trying to meet these goals. And these are, I would say, beacon for all the development that we are going to do, and all the projects. So today, even the corporates are following these social development goals, and they're claiming how their sustainable policies or how their product programs or how their thinking strategies are falling into this. So to me, this is an essential part of any designer's learning or any other professional's learning, because that's the way to go forward. And I think it should be important part of our conversation language that we use in our professional life, whether we work for social sector, corporates, or governments. So a lot of changes in funding, as I mentioned earlier. There's a funding coming in from CSR. I think there's some fixed percentage of profits have to be spent on CSR by law. That's helped a lot of fund to be released for sector. There's a lot of philanthropies and family offices, and there's also government programs which run. Yeah. So there's a growing awareness in terms of how that money should be spent. And I think it's not easy, as I said again, and of course, COVID kind of thing sucks away a lot of that fun. But I'm just saying that there's a fairly large amount of money to be spent properly, and we can make sure that it's spent in a meaningful way. So again, in terms of global development experts or industry experts, recognize design as a central to everything that's done in social sector, or how we take their needs and feedback of people into account, and how that helps the sector to build the solutions which are right. Yeah. So the design process by nature is more participatory and collaboratory, and which is something which other sort of processes have to learn. The social sector works with the participatory process. So I think the collaboration between design and the sector is very, very straightforward and easy. So I think what we have to remember is it's been recognized. So in that sense, to me, it also means that design has possible career choices to be made, and a lot of designers are doing great work in the sector, and they're also making that as a career choice. So some of my experiences in the past. So as a part of Philips, we did these programs called Philanthropy by Design. So this takes us from the management jargon of philanthropy by doing. So how do you co-create value? We worked on sort of low smoke cooking ideas, and we literally did a participatory process in terms of work with these self-help groups and women from villages to create employment and to build the solution which worked for them. And of course, it won a lot of awards. It got scaled up in Kenya, Guatemala, India, etc. So, but of course, it's a corporate initiative. It has sometimes its own life and how it progresses. But I think it's been a fantastic experience in terms of how end-to-end participatory method work. Then we did another program on mobile clinics, and these are high-tech clinics with a satellite dish, etc. So it was entire thing was about community, testing with a prototype, I would say, and getting deeper feedback. And I think with COVID, I think this becomes far more relevant, in terms of how it should be built. So this was a social innovation program in terms of service design, but it also involved a lot of things in terms of designing, say, detailed solutions to cater to privacy, or to cater to people's anxiety and expectations, etc. So what do you learn when you learn social theories? Because when you do social innovation, we would talk about some of the social theories. Yeah, they're not complex, simple, but essentially that changes our mindset, in terms of how we look at our lens, rather, and I think it's important to have that lens. So what happens in the mainstream design versus social innovation is a few things are very different. One is, uh, we want to bring in change. When social innovation, we're talking about bringing in a change in people, change from inside within, or community change from within. Like, you want to change the traffic in, say, Bangalore or Pune, you can't just change it by changing the road design if you don't change people, because they'll be still driving badly or parking badly, or sort of crowding on the road, whatever. So I feel it's about bringing in the change, so the whole system includes people at the center. So so I think, whereas mainstream design would not worry about that. They'll just give what people want, more of that. You want iPhone 11, take it. You want another iPhone 12, take it. You need a better camera, take it. That kind of a thing. So we need to understand people as complex societies. They're very complicated, and unlike understanding of people as individual as we do in mainstream design. And this is very important because um, as we talked, in fact, even companies face this challenge because they do a simplistic analysis of what their target is, and they all invariably get a surprise. And that's the reason the failure rate of industry innovation is very high. I mean, 85% projects don't reach their potential, and that's the Harvard study. So you can imagine, the importance of taking this kind of a route. So people rarely pay for what's good for them. We know that, and whereas people want to give more for what they want. So it's like, we'll pay for a Fitbit, but we won't pay in case municipality says we'll make a sort of a jogging track for you. So contribute something. So it's hard to package work solutions in social sector because you're talking about complex stuff, whereas you're talking about in the mainstream, you package things as artifacts, as a process or a product or a solution, very, very easy. So essentially, when they talk about what are the qualities required to work in social sector, I think one of the things they say is you should be able to work with uncertainty, the fuzziness. You should understand complexities. You should understand people. Understand, what are the kind of unsolvable problems, recognize them, and also understand that some of these problems are not technical problems, they're human problems. So you need to have deep compassion and a sense of responsibility. Then you should have ability to work with collaborators. They say you should be able to focus on outcome and impact, and not exactly on output. Then you should have a research mindset, because you should be very inquisitive and observant, etc. And if you read through this looks like a job description of a designer's role, right? And I think that's where I believe that designers are best suited to run some of these social innovation programs. Yeah. So what is this certificate program on, on social innovation? So I'll just give you a very, very high level highlight in terms of what we're going to try and achieve. And I think if you have any feedback on this, you're most welcome, so we can take it up as a part of, as we are designing the course and curriculum. So the basic broad objective is to understand what social innovation means as a discipline, as a career choice, and its impact or other global frameworks that that are being currently followed. It's also about broadening the perspective on what is social construct. So what does it mean to do social innovation versus mainstream innovation, and how does one proceed with that? Then it's also applying design methodologies for change. Now that's not very different from our design methodologies, but applying them for change. There's a slight tweak in terms of how we look at them on case studies or mock projects that we might do, because we have a lot of restrictions and it's a short kind of program. So we'll decide how we want to run that. Then initiating a group project which can change the world around you. I think that's what I want to do at the end of the day, to make sure that the group goes out with idea of what they could do. Yeah, so basically three step process. There'll be pre-work, there'll be session one, which is about introduction and discovery. Then there's group work, then there's a framing and conceptualization activity, then there's group work, and then we'll have reflection and commitment. And I guess some of you want to continue the project, you're most welcome. And the principles of this engagement will be interaction, openness. It will be participatory, it should be collaboratory, exploratory, and bold. I'm not talking about creativity or process and those things. I think some of us, most of us know that very well, but I think this should be extremely engaging, because that will decide whether if we can question each other, whether we can look at things in different ways and challenge each other. I think that's where we'll deliver the maximum value. Yeah. Now. So these are three sessions. I think first session is introduction and discovery, where we probably understand, broader scope in terms of how we work in social sector or social innovation. What are the global frameworks, goals? What are the social systems? Yeah, the essentials for successful design interventions in innovation, social innovation. Then project activity planning, etc. Yeah? So session two is mainly around framing and conceptualization. And I think this is the most important part of social innovation, because if we can frame the problem right, we can do a lot of things. And I'm going to talk about that very briefly. Maybe I won't spend time here. So this will be a fairly deeper exercise, I would say. And last part is reflection, commitment, and understanding what it means to do social impact career and what kind of things one needs to build. Yeah. Now, few principles that you'll learn. I'm not going to teach here, but I'm just going to give you a glimpse of what it means. So one is understanding stakeholders. Now, stakeholders are not just singular in sort of users or customers or people, but it's a very broader understanding in terms of what context they live in. So it could be family, community, regional, national. There's policy context, there's a cultural context, there's a natural bio-ecosystem context. Then the point I mentioned to you in terms of, say, framing the challenge. So it's also called a social innovation pathway. So one could take a standpoint where you're talking about a point solution. One could talk about something which is a higher level in terms of a systems or a process solution, or one can talk in terms of a transformative solution. Yeah, and I think there's a need that design sort of grows and matures to be able to sit around, the policymakers, to sort of run things in a way that it has a larger impact. I mean, just to give you an example, if there's a garbage issue, then at a point solution, you might do a plastic recycling or a kitchen waste composting kind of solution. But at a systems level, it's about community waste management system, or sort of a process of entire logistics of recycling, composting at an industrial scale. Whereas at the highest level, you're talking about advocacy and policy. Are you getting a lot of noise? Then just give me a second. I'll just close this window, because they've started some work outside the window. Sorry about that. So So I think it's important to understand the social innovation pathways and how we define the problems. And there's nothing right or wrong, but I think at least it builds a very broader understanding of how we work. Now, in terms of impact orientation, there's a whole theory of change, as they say. It's about how do you bring in the change, yeah, and how do you define the impact, and I think in the innovation process we talk about horizon model, where we have long-term, mid-term, short-term horizon, where we set the vision and you work backwards. So I think that's the same process where we define the impact and bring in this 5-step process where you can define what should be your pathway to change. And I think that's something we'll cover. Then participatory design is very important. Like, we talk about co-creation, which is very similar to participatory design, where the thin line is, co-creation is more collaborative and inclusive process, but the entire decisions as well as activities are owned and managed by experts. Whereas in a participatory design, it's about getting the stakeholders to contribute and to take decisions. Yeah. So I think that's a slight difference in terms of what participatory means. It's also called cooperative or co-design in some of the Scandinavian countries. Yeah. So I think we talked about this in terms of, it's about mainstream is about solving external problems, making things easy for people, etc., etc. Whereas social impact is about changing people internally to do the right things, even if they're difficult. Yeah? So I think that's a key kind of understanding. Yeah. Now I'll not go into details, but I think there are a lot of examples of such social innovation projects. I'll take 5 minutes to run through. I'm not going to explain, but this is a company that sells bottled water in UK, and they claim they are very sustainable bottled water company. I don't know how. And believe me, when I'm showing an example, I'm not showing them as a good or a bad example. It's up to us to judge, because they're also considered very innovative and socially oriented, because they put their profits into changing the water situation in Africa, in terms of giving people pure water or helping them to manage water, etc. Yeah, so they're making bottled waters, and they claim bottles are more sustainable, recycle, or they're sustainable glass, etc. Yeah. Then this is another example where again somebody's trying to solve the water issue or drinking water issue, and they created a whole portfolio of solutions, which are right from a small kiosk, which could be at a public place, to a kiosk, which could be at a like community space, etc. And there's a whole lot of employment generated through this program for women to manage these water kiosks. So they created women entrepreneurs in a way. So imagine how many things they've achieved. They solved the water problem. They created a technology that works, and they've created employment for women, and they've solved the water problem for a lot of people. Yeah, and you see a lot of these water ATMs, etc., coming in cities also now. In Bangalore has, for example, a lot of water ATMs. So then there's this e-water, which is the global water project. So they created this IoT solution to bring safe water to many in Africa, and essentially this mobile app helps to maintain some of these water systems that they created, and people pay per use to their mobile pay apps. And I think so as a result, the water is not seen, drinking water is not seen as a freely available commodity, but it's valued, and I think that's helping them to sort of manage the things well. Now, this is not about drinking water, and this is not from Africa or India, but this is from UK, where they've done the IoT-based solution to manage floods in Oxford region. And I think this is interesting because they are now put up sensor systems, and now they also help them to track groundwater and changing the levels and sort of all the patterns they can track very clearly, put them on the map, and they're available to public as well as weather people as well as disaster management folks. So again, when you get into social sector, there's a whole lot of new kind of reading that you could go through. Personally, for me, Victor Papanek, who wrote Design for the Real World, was inspiring. So that's how I started my journey way back, and I did a lot of those projects. And the second person who influenced me was E.F. Schumacher, and he wrote this book called Small is Beautiful. He was an economist inspired by Gandhi, and he wrote this book, and he talked a lot about appropriate technology and design. And I think that also kind of inspired me a lot. But I think there's a lot of new thinking happening in terms of systems thinking or design for impact, or and so on and so forth. I think there's a lot of literature on just to open us up to this problem. Now, I think this is like repeating the point, but there's a growing realization among global leaders that what they thought was a scientific problem or a technology problem that could be solved. For example, Gus Pitt, who's an environmental lawyer and policy advocate, so he thought that environmental issues, the climate change, the greenhouse gases, or ozone depletion, can be answered by good science for 30 years. But he realizes that at the end of almost towards the end of his career, he realized that these are not problems of technology or environment or nature. They're problems of selfishness, greed, and apathy. And he says, to deal with these, we need spiritual and cultural transformation, and we scientists don't know how to do that. And great thing is, of course, there are social scientists, psychologists, and people who know some of those spiritual and cultural transformations. But I think we are the ones who bridge this gap between science, technology, and the culture and social. And I think that's where design has a role to play. So, Priya, how are we doing on time?
Quite good. If you want to, take another 5-10 minutes, please feel free to do so.
I also wanted interaction. So, okay, some more inspiration. I'm just going to run through so that you know what social innovation means in a broader sense. Yeah. So, Arogya Setu app. I mean, it was a social innovation in a way that countrywide. We tried to get how do we do contact tracing. Now, developing countries do that very normally, like Singapore and all that. I mean, but still, it's not mandatory. Here, we made it mandatory, etc., etc. And a population of 1.3 billion, we had 16 crore. That's like 162 million people downloaded it. One doesn't know how many used it, but if you realize that the whole efficacy of app got killed because it was not possible that every Indian can have it, and if every Indian cannot have it, the solution just doesn't work. And it was touted as one of the biggest success and one of the biggest sort of downloaded app. But it was a very false sense of success. And that's the point I feel, that's the kind of critical view we need to build when we talk about programs and projects, that what it has achieved, what impact it has made, and where it has failed to make that impact, or where it has, sort of missed the whole point. And of course, I'm not talking about privacy, security, safety issues that it has. People have hacked it, and they've shown even addresses of people where they live. So social discrimination, safety issues, etc. I have had a lot of challenges. I was in the COVID hospital and doing some research, and I was told that there are no patients in 3 kilometers radius. Yeah, whereas where I live, I'm told there are 2 patients in 500-meter radius in Bangalore. So I think there are a lot of challenges. Then you have fantastic social innovation programs like Arvind Eye Hospital. I think every person who wants to understand social innovation should study Arvind model. It's an innovation done by a bunch of doctors, and particularly Dr. V. And I think they've changed how eye care is managed globally. Yeah, and they have demolished a lot of myths in terms of what can be done and what cannot be done. Another, the whole thing about Grameen, that's Bangladesh-based microfinance firm or organization, I would say, set up by Mohammed Yunus. They've changed everything how microfinance should work. They've done phenomenal work, and they've gone and established, Grameen Bank, Grameen Phone, and I think everything has, essentially transformed lives of poor. And that's and of course Mohammed Yunus also got a Nobel Prize for that. But I think these are essential case studies we should see. Now, this is a story of a social entrepreneur. I mean, Swapnil Chaturvedi. He's also called a poop guy, by the way. He's very proud of that. So, US trained, highly educated professional. He's set up this company called Samagra, and essentially he's using technology to make sure that the loos are maintained and cleaned, and it's a phenomenal model in terms of how he's building it up. Yeah? So again, somebody might say it's like Sulabh, but I think he's going beyond, personal dependencies to make it more self-sustaining, enterprises as individual units, as well as the whole system. Then there could be social innovation ideas which come out of a product or a simple point solution. There's a Fairphone, there's a Dutch bunch of guys from Holland. They created this modular phone which could be maintained and repaired endlessly, and it's available fairly economically. So Fairphone is a phenomenal thing in terms of making sure that the hardware we use is not lost every 2-3 years and create garbage dump. Tom's is another example you've seen. Tom's is a shoe company. They're a fashion brand in a way, I would call fast fashion brand. So they have a lot of baggage. I mean, a lot of criticism they face because of the fast fashion tag. But what Tom's has done is they've had the original one-on-one company. In the sense, you buy one pair, they would donate one pair to people who need shoes, and they've almost given 100 million shoes so far. They also donate third of their profits to charity. So in a way, they're showing a way that the profit need not be dirty. Now one can also criticize them for being environmentally damaging, for selling like many shoes, and people go and buy these shoes even if they don't need or something like that, or they keep changing them because those designs are so exciting. So I think there could be criticism both ways, but I think there's a way they are building their own model. Yeah? Then Kiva is again a microfinance company where they crowdfund loans. So I can contribute $25 to Kiva, and Kiva in turn gives it as a loan to people who need it in some of the African countries. So I think it's a very interesting business model because it's more like a P2P kind of a credit transfer, and I think there's some admirable innovation that's gone in the whole system. And just imagine if you build something like this, there's a lot of role designers can play in terms of the whole experience design, the whole sense of safety, security, the whole touch point design, etc. Yeah. BioLite is a company that creates again objects. Sort of they create these energy alternatives as they call them. But again, it's a lot of companies in India as well as globally. They create these things that can work on solar or can reuse energy or can harvest energy, etc. So I think there's a lot of such kind of examples which we could look at in terms of point of inspiration. Yeah. So that's it from my side. So we could open up the floor for discussion, Q&A. Was it clear? Was I audible?
Yes, absolutely clear. Audio, video, everything was fine. I'm requesting the audience once more to please share their questions via the Q&A tab. And I believe we already have one coming in.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. So when working in the rural areas, people are a bit hesitant to take up new solutions because they do not trust new entities. So any idea as to how can we tackle this?
Yeah, I think it's a very pertinent observation. So people in rural areas are simple in many ways, but they have also been taken for granted and taken for a ride for years, right? So people have come and promised things, people have come and sold things. So I think there's definitely a trust deficit when it comes to rural areas as well as how they want to work. And in fact, that's the reason in social innovation space, what is said is, if you're not participatory, if you don't build relationship with the stakeholders, yeah, if you don't do community development, if you don't build a sort of a grassroots network, you cannot run social innovation. I think you need to build a trust, and I think that's the essential part. So you need to have sort of local trusted partners on board. You need to have community on board, and you need to understand, and they need to understand that you're not trying to sort of build something that you want to build, but you're trying to build something that they should be building, or you want to sort of work with them to build something. So I think if our role should be, because if you go in a very intimidating manner as an expert or a professional, I think it's going to backfire for sure. But if you go as a collaborator, or you go as a someone who's going to help them put things together, and if they're community leaders or local grassroots workers, I mean, if they get convinced, I think it's a lot more easier. So, and unfortunately in India, the civil society is fairly widespread and deep rooted, of different kinds. I mean, there are people working in the area of justice, to people working in the area of broad development, agricultural development, and many areas. So I think it's important to get together with them. It's also important to work with the government. I mean, you need not take the project from government, but you need to make sure they're involved. And I think combining all this, I think it takes longer time compared to, say, corporate, where we know the customer, and somebody sets up a meeting for us, or we set up a focus group. I think it's a lot more complex in that sense. But at the same time, once you get over the barriers, I think the journey is phenomenal, because they just welcome you in their houses. I mean, the level of trust is very different. I mean, I have experienced it, and a lot of times it's not about trust, but it's about sense of doubt. Like, what are you trying to do, and you know, is it real? And I think one needs to get over those barriers, and you need to try and speak their language, be with them. Like, simple things like, if you go to their house, they would offer you water or tea or something, and it's important that you show build the trust right from there, in terms of making sure you sort of share things with them. And I think it's important. I mean, I think that's a lot of learning. When you talk about villages. Yeah?
Sure. Thank you so much. We've got Ankit Kumar Singh wanting to know how to create a bridge between digital interventions and crafts development when it's already too late for crafts practitioners to learn and get adhered to new technology and systems. When technology is all about corporate setups and traditional crafts is exactly the opposite. How do we create a bridge?
Yeah. Again, this is interesting, and I see this coming up very often, because there's a general belief that if there's a solution, it has to be technology solution. Yeah? And firstly, I want to question that. Secondly, we need to understand if technology has a role to play in that specific, I would say, activity, maybe it craft development or craftsman, and if it is going to create an impact, or are there any other alternatives? What does community feel about it? So if if technology is going to help, believe me, there will not be any barrier in terms of sort of learning as well as accepting it. A lot of times, what happens is technology is done for the sake of technology, and that's where it fails. I think if technology is done for impact, because then it makes a lot of difference. So there has to be a purpose, there has to be a meaning. Yeah. And I mean, it's like, if you guys must have heard Simon Sinek, one needs to know why, and then one needs to answer how before you start talking about what. And so to come back to this, I don't see these as two opposites. Yeah. So, and there are a lot of craft communities who may not learn how to operate computers, but they know how to operate mobile phones. I mean, just to give you an example, I went and met self-help groups in 2006 in connection with the low smoke stove, the Chula project. And one of the questions that I asked this bunch of ladies who came with their portfolio bags and sitting around under a tree on chairs, we were just discussing, and I asked them, what is that one thing they would like to change in their what is that one thing they want in the village to change, and I expected them to say we need a road, or we need water, or we need electricity, or we need hospital or school, or some better building for school, better building for hospital. So this lady who was like a leader, I mean, she used to be a goat herd 4 years ago, but once after they set up this self-help group and microfinance activity, she actually rose to become the leader for the team. Totally illiterate, but she learned. So she says, what we need is information. And I think you need to understand this if you are coming from a technology point of view, because she is talking about information. Because if she says, if I have information, I can change a lot of things. I said, give me an example, because I was totally floored. So she said, if we know as villagers that local gram panchayat or the village committee every year gets funds from the government, state government, to do village road repairs and building village roads, to do school repairs and to build additional facilities for school. Say if we have that information, we can change a lot of things. So today, unfortunately, we don't have that information. So apparently they learned about such things, and they got in 2 years they got multiple roads built for the village. Then the village had a storm and the school roof went away. So then they got the panchayat saying, get it built, you have the money. And the villagers got demanding, and that's what empowerment is all about. And that's where the technology comes in. And these bunch of ladies were negotiating with Airtel to create an app that they can use for their simple feature phone, which they could use essentially so that they don't need to walk miles to check whether women have deposited the money in the bank, or if the money has been collected or not, how much money has been collected. So he's saying we have a tower in the village. We are asking them to sort of build the app, which Airtel had agreed, I believe. I don't know what happened later, but just imagine women demanding that if we had an app like this, I wish I had this. I don't need to then walk miles on a daily basis. I get the information to me. So just think of what technology means to them, because they want to apply the technology in a meaningful way. So you need to find this kind of an insight to say how you'll apply technology. Yeah. So I guess, and that's where I like what Schumacher talks in terms of what's the appropriate technology. What is the need that you're fulfilling? What is the kind of problem you're solving? Yeah.
Sure, thank you.
Answer?
Oh. Yes. I also would like to check with you that can we extend by another 7 minutes, because we've got quite a lot of questions coming in.
I'm okay to extend, no problem.
Yeah, does that work? Great.
No, absolutely.
All right. So Prithviraj would like to know that there is a widespread belief that social innovations are not sustainable. He doesn't believe that. But can you suggest what one needs to focus upon to have a sustainable success in social innovations?
Yeah. So again, I think a lot of these things are contextual. I mean, I showed you some of the examples, and some of them are successful, some of them are not successful. Some of them reach up to a pilot stage and wither away. Yeah. Now, I'll just compare, say, mainstream industry versus social innovation industry versus mainstream innovation industry. So mainstream innovation, according to the Harvard study, which is done by Christensen, 85% of the projects that companies do, and they are large corporates with all kinds of resources at their disposal, including smart designers, technology folks, entire works they have. So 85% of those projects fail. Yeah, and of course you're not counting number of prototypes you make or number of products that you want to launch but actually you don't launch, etc. So the failure in innovation is huge. If you talk about startup failure, it's even bigger, right? So innovation programs, startups in the mainstream industry, all of them have a very high rate of failure. So, but the thing is, you don't point that out. You just talk about what revenue that company is made at the end of the year, right? And I think we need to make similar distinction in social sector also. I mean, you need to allow certain failures, yeah. But today, honestly, the rate of failure is pretty high. That I agree. And in fact, that's the reason behind that is invariably somebody comes and gives a fairly one-sided top-down technology kind of solution. And once you do that, you don't have people who are takers, to put it simply. Like for example, just now we discussed like how do you get technology for craft sector development. Now, imagine if I put some apps and some IoT system for craft development. You know, where sometimes there's no power, or where there's no, sort of technical expertise there, your solution is bound to fail. You can't say that, okay, it failed because you don't know how to operate computer, or you don't know how to manage technology. I think that's an unfair statement to make because that was always known. Now, the whole idea of doing a human-centered design or a people-centered design is to understand what limitations in which you're working and then provide a solution. What is right and what is appropriate in that situation, and then provide a solution. And I believe that one of the reasons why a lot of social innovation programs fail is because many of them don't have a designer, I would say, bridging these kind of different gaps. Like we actually stand in the intersection of what people need, what business wants to do, or what technology can do. Right? We know those three pillars. And I think we can join these dots in a creative manner. And a lot of those programs and designers are not there. And even if they're there, sometimes they don't take a stand in terms of how to solve the problems holistically. So wherever this has been achieved, I think the results have been phenomenal. I mean, I just gave you an example of whole Grameen, enterprise. I mean, I call it enterprise now because they are beating the businesses in terms of what they can do with that supposed to be small, microfinance activity, or Arvinda Hospital, or some of the. I think there are many examples of success. If you start searching, yeah. So to me, and that's where the role for designer comes in. That we want to make sure that the projects are set on the right path. The second thing that happens in some of these programs is you don't look at long term. I mean, you can't apply, say, a very short term focused, agile sprints kind of mindset in social innovation. That's another thing because that short term focus can fail very badly. It's like the village says we don't have water, and somebody says, big guy comes and government says, okay, let's spend 5,000 crore, let's set up a dam. And it damages everything around that dam, very badly. So I think those are the kind of things, pitfalls one has to avoid. And I think success has to be planned in, and the impact has to be envisioned. The road to impact may not be singular; it could be multiple roads, and that's why they say in the social sector, suppose you want to say bring in water, you may have to start on multiple tracks in terms of long-term, short-term, mid-term initiatives to mitigate that challenge. And all of them eventually lead to the end impact that you plan. So for example, you solve the immediate problem by maybe supplying water to the village that's dying of thirst. Then maybe you start to get people to volunteer and use some of these government schemes to build check dams and sort of check the rainwater harvesting, etc. Maybe start to look for old ways of water management and bring them alive. In Rajasthan, somebody's got these this irrigation system from ancient times got revived, um, and 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 they had these water channels that were running and conserving water from evaporating. So I think a lot of those things can be done in a very sustainable manner. It needs, of course, focus, dedication, and ownership, and that's why community needs to own it as well. So is that okay?
Yes, thank you so much. It is. I'm going to give a glimpse into your educational journey to the audience, since we've got quite a few questions in terms of what they should study for and what's the kind of career path that they can carve out in the field of social innovation. So, like for example, you've done your engineering, and then you've done your Masters of Design at IIT Bombay. Then you moved on to IIM Bangalore, uh, and then of course there's also um, the ILSS, the India Leaders for Social Sector, the leadership program that you've been a part of. So, at what stage did you realize, in terms of that innovation is now, a field or a ecosystem that you're foraying into, and then specifically social innovation? So, if you could kind of just help
Yeah,
the audience understand what
yeah,
they should do, what they should study for to make a
yeah.
profession in social innovation.
Yeah. So I think good thing is the social innovation or sector. They have such dearth of expertise of different kind, that no field is sort of, you can say that we have more scope or somebody says I have less scope. There's scope for everyone. You have organizations like IDEO has IDEO.org on a global level. In India, we have Industry Foundation, or there are a whole lot of designers who set up these kind of fairly large social enterprises, enabling entities, etc. You have Viara Network, and you have Uloi Network, and I mean a lot of them are there. Okay, so people have done that. Now, industry recognizes that they need to involve designers. So that is in terms of demand. I think there's fairly growing demand, and there's a fairly interesting demand. A lot of consulting organizations also have social arm like BCG and Dalberg, and a lot of them have that design and social innovation. So there's a lot of scope in terms of what design can do. Now, to coming back to okay, so my background. So I am an ILSS. They're very short thing. I was more of a leadership program. It was just 2 sessions of 2 weeks each. And that was more like just introduction of general kind of management thing. I mean, I had no intentions of studying, getting an MBA or something. It's not an MBA. So second thing, ILSS I did because I thought that would be a good transition from because 10 years I spent, 15 years I spent in corporate. If I want to move to social sector, and after a long gap in from India, I felt it may be a good idea to understand what's happening in the sector. So I did that. That's a course run by Ashoka founders, and it's a fairly interesting thing for senior leaders. Um, but coming back to discussion in terms of where that thing started. So after IIT, after finishing design, I worked for a couple of years as an industry designer, and then I felt that I need to do something more meaningful. So for 8 years, I was running my consultancy firm, and we did a lot of this appropriate technology, craft development, livelihoods, educational, sort of tools and kits design kind of programs with tribal areas and all kinds of things. I think that was basically inspired by a lot of Papanek and Schumacher ideologies. And to me, I feel it goes back then. Uh, and it was humongously satisfying, I would say. And we did some interesting projects, and very simple things could transform. But later, when I say joined Phyllis, luckily Phyllis has a lot of this research and strategy happening in parallel. So we did scanning of healthcare domain for bottom of the pyramid. We did this entire cooking studies, which were at a, which were uh, essentially understanding indoor smoke, etc. And I think that also gave me a glimpse of what happens, in the wider sections of society, not just the premium, sort of, or upper classes, or top of the pyramid, or middle of the pyramid. But it gave me a spectrum in terms of what's happening. And we did a lot of research across the country in healthcare, in homes, and in education, and a lot of these areas. Now, of course, China and Honeywell was like a bit of a gap, but again, I mean, I make sure if I'm working on a project that it's meaningful in many ways. Even if I'm doing a mainstream design, which could be very stylized or whatever. So we need to make sure that it's not, sort of damaging environment. It's not probably going to kill someone, or it's going to have a true benefit. It is going to have a long-term impact on people in their lives. And I think, luckily for me, I work for companies who also had some conscious in that sense. So Honeywell, we created systems which were reducing energy consumption, making buildings green, making cities safer, making buildings more productive, etc. So I think there's a lot of satisfaction in even doing such things, even if it's not directly like a social sector program, but it's very meaningful, very useful for the society to, sort of going forward. So I think one can keep that outlook throughout, whether you work for, say, a Philips, or you work for a, say, an NGO, say Gates Foundation. So I think there's a way to make sure that balance is maintained, and make sure that you take decisions which are conscientious, and you need to convince your stakeholders that what is the right thing to do. So I think there's a lot of things that can be done. Now I see some of the questions like, people are doing undergrad in video or communication, or industrial design, or interaction design, technology. So just to give you an idea, I think technology is a huge area for intervention today. And when I'm saying that, it needs to have a very meaningful sort of interpretation. So just to give you an example, healthcare. Now, there's a lot of health people are in remote areas, they don't have access to primary health, etc. So even doing something like telehealth. Now, telehealth was considered something here that you do for poor. Today, telehealth has become necessity for your urban population, especially older population, because you just cannot get up and go to a hospital. Now, just if you just think of this as a problem of, how does the care get delivered to patient at their location, whether it's a village or whether it's a city or wherever. I think even if you start thinking on those lines, I think the only way to solve that problem is deploying some kind of technology. I mean, it will have to be like that. But then if you understand the problem, if you understand the context, if you understand people involved, because they're invariably either people who are not literate, or they're not computer savvy, or they're too old. And that's what happens with people who need constant help in cities or villages. And I think the things would start to fall in place by itself. And that's why I keep saying that you need to sensitize yourself to broader spectrum of issues and social sector challenges. And that will help you to sort of make these choices, whether you work for, so say, you can say, automotive company doing cars, or you're working for a mobile phone or consumer electronics company, or you're working for Google or Facebook, or you're working for an NGO. I think it probably, you need to build that mindset of being responsible. Does it answer the question? And of course, to put it simply, there's a lot of work to be done on, you can say, communication, advocacy. And then the video becomes a very important means. So I think video can be used for education. Crowdsourced video can be used to sort of spread the messages. Learn from each other, peer learning. And I think, and that's been used. I mean, if you look at some of the interventions in the agri-tech space. I mean, they started to do peer video to share best practices among the farmers. And I think those kind of thinking are very important. So it doesn't matter which discipline you are in. I think the sector needs people. Sector needs experts.
Sure. Thank you so much.
So
I guess,
any
Go
other
ahead.
question? Any other thing that needs to be addressed?
So for more questions, I think we'll have to take them offline. And I'm sure, I mean, with the upcoming masterclass, I'm sure a lot can be answered during those as well.
Yeah.
So we'll be concluding the session here. So I'm requesting the audience that for more questions to reach out to us offline on LinkedIn. Special thanks to our guest speaker innovator, Mr. Unmesh Kulkarni, for his time and sharing the value-add takeaways from his innovation journey. We'd like to invite you all to our next session on power of predictions and learning about data-driven innovation this Wednesday, 11th November 2020, 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. Our guest speaker is Mr. Mukesh Jain, Chief Technology and Innovation Officer, Vice President and Global Product Head of 890 by Capgemini. So this curated series will feature a variety of industry thought leaders and social innovators like Mr. Unmesh Kulkarni, who are a part of the global MIT ID innovation ecosystem. We recognize the need to reach out to thousands of aspiring innovators and help them gain the skills and knowledge required for their dreams to become a reality. We encourage to connect with us via our social channels. For those interested in becoming top-notch innovators, we invite you to explore our courses that will fast-track your career path. So log on to www.mitidinnovation.com to kickstart your social innovation journey with MIT ID Innovation Program. Let's learn, innovate, lead. Thank you once again, Mr. Unmesh Kulkarni. It was wonderful having you on board and listening to your inputs, and of course, that you are freely sharing from your experience and helping us learn a lot more about social innovation.
Thanks so much. I guess along with the questions, if the audience can send requests in terms of what they expect, or they have suggestions, I think that will also help.
Right. So we will be in touch with them offline for sure. Great.
Okay.
So yours innovatively, Priya Thavan signing off. To everyone, stay connected, stay safe, and keep innovating every day.
Thank you. All the best.
Yes. Thank you so much.